First of all, I want to say greetings, everyone. My name is Matoli Motsamai. I am a researcher at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Pietermaritzburg, South Africa. I think many of you know about South Africa. South Africa is one of the countries which is named after its location. So it's famous for the policies of apartheid, which had a huge role, which played a role in marginalization of women potters, specifically black females, who are the custodian of ceramic heritage in the context of South Africa. The province of Limpopo, as I said earlier on, it's located in the northern parts of South Africa. During the time of apartheid, it was called Northern Transvaal. It had 3 homeland. Homeland are native reserve. Within those native locations, there were 3 ethnic groups that had their own homeland. Within those homeland, we have different groups, ethnic groups, that has coexisted for years before the colonial encounters. These ethnic groups, they share similarities. Some of these similarities are evident in the production of ceramic arts, which is part and parcel of African heritage. So many people that I've interviewed, I try all my best to make sure that I have to balance the situation, because in the past, African ceramics were started by outsiders with ulterior motives. They were not started for the purpose of advancement, but they started for just separating Africans from each other. So this presentation tends to address some of those past injustices. So, like I said earlier on, I have interviewed women from 3 former homelands, namely Venda, which was homeland for Venda people, and Leboa, which was homeland of heterogeneous Northern Sotho and Ndebelés, and Batsonga, which is Shangaan. These women from those regions, they produce ceramic vessels for tourist market. In the past, these ceramic vessels were produced for domestic usage, meaning that the women potters, who are senior women in African context, they produce these artifacts to use within household. But because of the transformation of the society and related issues, they are now produced for tourist market. Like I said earlier on, that these are the women who live in the rural areas and who have been coexisting for years. So some of these women, in fact, I can proudly say that all of them, they are self-taught, unlike in the Western society where you have to go to school to study ceramic production. So women in Limpopo province, they are self-taught. And then this is very important. The background is very important so that you can be able to understand how the changes that occur over the time, which is actually shape the production of modern ceramic within that particular area of Limpopo. So these women had no access to art schools in the past. Even today, some of them don't even have access to the galleries where they can take their artifacts and exhibit them. They have to rely on maybe tourists who would come and negotiate a price. Some of them, they don't even pay in reasonable price. They end up having to exploit these artists. So because of the lack of market base, it's actually discouraging to continue to produce art, specifically for young generations who grow up within those the area, like young kids. They don't see ceramic as a very interesting. So it's seen as something dirty, associated with poverty. As you can see that in most cases when you read about African ceramic, it's about traditions and old static tradition that doesn't change. So today I wanted to try to give another pictures of these ceramics. So this actually was a background general overview of South African ceramics in Limpopo, how they were marginalized within the ceramic heritage of Africa. Sorry. Yeah. My presentation. The topic of presentation, as you can see, it's ceramic trends in Limpopo, South Africa. This presentation intends to contribute to update existing and provide new insight in theoretical and practical knowledge about contemporary South African ceramic by paying attention to local African vernacular tradition and iconographic features as a signifier of ongoing changing society in South Africa. So it's very important to look back at the history in order to understand where African ceramic are actually coming from. Like I said in my general overview, South African ceramic are part and parcel of society in general. So there is an old proverbial expression associated with pottery in the Chivenda language, which is one of the languages spoken in Limpopo, that says, Tibundi Kali, Chambiru ni amongwe achitiburi. Literal translation, you can lift the lid of the pot to see what is inside, but what is inside a person's heart can only be known by the person himself or herself. Indigenous context, what you see on a person's external appearance does not reflect that person's feeling or character, and that their real truth resides within that particular person. The point I'm trying to make here is that African pottery has sophisticated indigenous philosophy and worldview that transist persistent ethic concept of static and tribal construct as they were viewed by the Western world in the past. The plethora of indigenous meaning and the discourse about ceramic tradition are the product of the specific and local socio-historical factors that continue under new market conditions to shape and reflect normative artistic forms of discourse and epistemology. It is essential in this regard, number one, to elaborate explicit indigenous discourse, a non-discursive assumption expressed in both contemporary and older pottery tradition. And secondly, to associate productive process with local, even cross-cultural proverbs that allude to ceramic. Some of these proverbs are Namba kambechezwa ipurakali, which is which is Chivenda. Another proverb is called nyama yokuhonzekeriwa ihanzulambita. It's Chitsonga languages. And then in Sotho Saleboa namahopeletswa ipumapija. These proverbs it's found in all ethnic groups, but in the past the colonial apartheid scholars they say that these people are actually separated. They were living away from each other, therefore they cannot get together. But the proverbs actually prove that these people were actually related in terms of ceramics that they make. So this could be seen as a classic example of long existing cultural fusion between indigenous African ethnic group in art history. Evidently, in the form of idiocratic artistic expression through form of iconographic features and proverb, which still bear influence of each other within the area, though they were separated by colonial boundaries. This interconnection requires extensive work in incorporating ethnic, socio-cultural, and conceptual information of the state of contemporary ceramic production rather than continue to employ an inappropriate Western colonial perspective. Addressing lack of this contemporary ethnic-oriented information regarding change in the vessel techniques and style can help deconstruct long Western notion about the static nature of South African pottery, especially by highlighting the role of indigenous belief systems. So the point I'm trying to make here is that to better understand African pottery, it is very important to look at some of the traditions and worldview that actually exist within African community. For example, I said earlier on that in the past there was some view which associate with African potteries as a static. As you can see that in the pictures, which is the picture of my sister, who played major role when it came to assisting me to collect these data. As I indicated earlier, and that unlike many society, the ceramic produced in Limpopo, just like other African regions, are gender-based, which means that are actually produced by women. Men specialize by sculptures. So for me, as a man, to be able to better understand the production process involved in making potteries, I had to rely on my sister, who worked as a fashion designer and who better understood how the women do this kind. So she went outside and tried to gather information for me. Then I wrote this information about these ceramics. So I can see that I don't want to bore you or to give information like end up getting bored. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to be showing you a lot of pictures about the ceramic production in the Limpopo. So in South Africa, there is actually a growing interest of collecting indigenous ceramic vessels. But current research primarily focused on traditional domestic functions and museum collection. However, a large part of cultural significance of South African ceramic vessels and their dynamic production process are largely neglected by both art collectors and Western trained researchers. In particular, there is a lack of information relating to the new dynamic trends in productive techniques in function, as well as the economic sustainability of the women potters. My observation about ceramic vessel and recent innovation come from interviewing women ceramic artists within the region, where I've been conducting ethnographic field work with assistance of, like I said earlier on, with my sister. I found that ceramic vessels currently made within the region demonstrated significance and innovative in traditional canoe. So therefore, it's essential in this regard not only to identify different stylistic in related to changing market and condition, but also investigate local discourse about assumption related to both contemporary and older pottery making tradition, their different contexts of production and their causes, as well as their possible changing meaning. Some of the ceramic vessels of northern Lesotho, as you can see, and Bavendas. Previously in the past, the Bavenda potteries known as the kali were actually used for cooking. But because of the modification, now some form of these potteries, as you can see on figure 4, northern Lesotho pottery, this is the place where they are being produced. They are actually produced outside using wood. They are fired overnight. As you can see on the background, there are some form of art that are painted by oil enamel paint, but this is the Western paint. It's not a traditional paint. So, which means that actually the women are changing. These forms of potteries, they come in different types. We've got large that looks like a bowl and jars. And some of these, like I said, they were traditionally used within the household. Nowadays, some of the household functions have changed due to availability of commercial aluminum vessel and studio produce market, as you can see from the background there. So this is the open area where clay vessels have been produced in Limpopo, and then there are different forms of them. It's become clear to me that once popular South African ceramic making practices and form need to be documented, in particular with regard to contemporary discourse about them. This will help us to understand how ceramic vessels are being changed to accommodate new socio-economic, cultural conditions, new use, and future prospect about those who are still making and using them. As you can see in figure 6, there are people who still use ceramic arts for the purpose of selling them to tourists rather than to use them within the household. So the ceramic, unlike in many Western society, many people who make pottery in Limpopo, they use natural resources that they actually got from their areas. This is actually based on, or it's actually influenced by so-called citizen science. So potters actually know exactly where to find specific material, such as a clay. Beyond there, you can see that on figure number 7, there's a red iron-bearing soil clay that they actually collect. Old women will collect and take that to their household and to make some pots. On figure 8, that's where surface deposit of the clay used by potters. So it looks like a white, it's actually a black clay, which actually used within the household. The potters sometimes, instead of using tap waters that are actually used by studio ceramic artists, rural potters, they prefer to use sometimes rainwater because of the rainwater are actually, they make very good vessels because actually they are natural. So some of the ceramic vessels that have been produced by women are these ones. They are big actually, as you can see that they are produced by Watsonga and Northern Lesotho. They use what you call graphite and red earth to make and to decorate them. Each potter has got his own style, but all of their style are informed by traditions. Asian tradition, like traditional art. Some of these pots are bigger. You can even put a kid inside it. They were used to, actually, as you can see on the background of figure number 10, there's a pot where it was a brewing beer, which is called Dingho. In Northern Lesotho are those that you used to store, to carry water and store. And those that you'll find in the other side are vendor vessels. The Sambero is the one that is open, which is actually used for washing hands. And then we also have zikali, which used for cooking. The kali is the one which is like, it's a bigger, so they are used for cooking. They were used for cooking, but now, like I said earlier on, they are changed to suit tourist market. The colors that you find in potteries like these ones, which look like red, are actually informed by environment. Environment in this context, I'm referring to where potters live and work. So they are informed by indigenous kettles. So the kettle has a roles, which important roles for African society, because many people, when they marry a wife or a woman, they use cattle to pay cows. They use cow to get a woman. So therefore, many women, they feel like they have to pay back by using some of the design that are peculiar, or the colors that are found in the cattle. So that's why you find that there's a red clay which is very dominant there. So we have got some cultural signifiers that are actually evident in making potteries. These are the vernacular cultural signifiers that are actually found from natural, are sourced from natural environment. The surface, as you can see from the 13, figure number 13, the surface decorations on ceramic vessel are key elements of pottery aesthetic qualities, as they appeal to vessel visibility rather than its utility. Decorative motifs are intended to be admired and serve as visual signifiers, maker of self, individual and group affinities. Stylistic motifs on ceramic vessel enhance desirabilities of this ware for non-domestic consumers, especially tourists. Most of the tourists who buy these vessels are not Africans, they're outsiders. So some of these buyers, they would sometimes ask buyers to change the form of ceramics to accommodate their own. In the process, African ceramics, they lose values and aesthetic, and then they become another things else than African art. Some women artists that have been interviewing them, they told me that they gain knowledge of this design and motif from family members, some from other experts within their own community, as well as from potters in area further afield. But sometimes design are suggested, like I said, by buyers. And then the tourists or the potters will then have no choice, will end up with no choice except to follow what the buyer wants so that they can be able to sell their artifacts. Hence, stylistic motif and surface of design originated both consciously and unconsciously are often absorbed directly by influence which may be outside the immediate sphere in which potter live and work. Some of these potters that have been produced by women are as follows. You can see the first one, figure 17. It's a Northern Sotho storage vessels known as ngho. These storage vessels in the past was used to store beer, traditional beer, and the waters. The second one, it's another Northern Sotho cylindrical vase known as ngwana. It's extended, so they added a certain portion. So it's no longer African vessels. It look like more like a Western flower vessels. So the materials that were used were red clay, cosmetic clay, and red ochre, known as litsoku in vernacular, which is actually was sourced within immediate vicinities. And graphite, as you can see, the something like a red is a graphite. For pre-firing decoration, wood, ash, and melora sometimes are used. Favorite time for firing ceramic is actually in the evening, but overnight is also another time. These ceramic vessels are low and slow fired, similar to techniques used by to fire typical domestic wares for other ethnic groups, including Zulus. So they use the same techniques used by Zulus. So I'm not going to talk about Zulu ceramic that as they've already been written off by many scholars. So now, because of the situation, many potters, they are trying all the best to make sure that they have to keep on with what actually happening around their area in order to sell their product. In the process, they began to adopt the Western ways of merging their traditions and contemporary vessel making processes. For example, potters are beginning to use, as you can see, number 20, figure 20. This pot is called pijana. It's not actually painted with the African resources or material. This is the Western paint, and then it's meant for tourism. Whereas the second, the figure number 19, similar small pots which was used in the past for cooking vegetable sauces. They use actually traditional earth colors, which actually similar, which relate to the kettle, like I said earlier on. So these are the form of the tradition that now have been changed. So another one is vendors. As you can see the difference between vendors and Northern Sotho. So the Northern Sotho, actually, if you look at them, they use graphite. It's dominant graphite, and it's as well as litsoku, which is red clay. It's evidence. But when you come to a vendor, you can see that they are quite different, but they are similar, because all these potters, they use red clay. The two vessels that you see there, it's one of the big one, it's called mvobelo and chidudu, both for cooking. The bigger one, the smallest one is for, which is known as chidudu, is for cooking, but the materials or the resources that are being used there are wax shoes and floor polish, which are not indigenous Africans. They are industrial materials. So those are the things that, or some of the resources that have been adopted by potters to transform their potteries. So these are some of the modified pottery, domestic potteries that the form is not African. It's the Western form. It's a combination of the Western ceramic vessels and then African indigenous motif. So as I'm about to wrap, this is another one where the use of commercial paints, it's visible, as you can see. So my point is that the new animal paint painted ceramic vessels are being produced based on older design. The growing tourism industry offers economic incentive to rural women ceramic artists who are developing innovative ways to produce small and transportable vessels easily carried home. This is dynamic two-way process. Tourists buy these as a memento, which are designed with them in mind as a constant reminder that they have visited a particular area in Africa. As you can see, these are some of the products that are produced. And it is therefore clear to continue to talk of ceramic production as happening at the village level is no longer sufficient. South African ceramic artists stretch beyond the village and the tribe. Due to urbanization and rise of tourist market, commercial available materials such as animal paints are fast becoming an important part not only for contemporary ceramic technology but of local economic, of cultural change. Interestingly, since outsider commercial paint and resulting vessels are no longer considered aesthetic indigenous wear, they can be used anytime and everywhere without older concern with avoidance rules, as well as pressure of cheap ceramic produced by migrants who are coming to South Africa. It's also stimulating local potters to develop adaptive competitive strategies. So I'm going to go to conclusion by saying that due to the massive availabilities of commercial ware, some of the potters, they began to realize that the material that they've been using in the past are no longer going to be relevant. So therefore, they are returning the past. So what I'm trying to do now, my current research is looking at some form of vessels that are called Difala. As you can see, that's one. These are the most innovative vessels that have ever been recorded. I don't know any artist or any ceramic artist or any anthropologist who ever documented this form of vessels. They are made of dung and decorated by earth. So there's no anthropologist in I think it's in South Africa, even Europe, who documented them. They are bigger of this size. So these are what I'm currently researching, my future research. So just to wrap up, because I know that I'm left with 2 minutes, I just want to say that my presentation was actually trying to update you guys about what actually happening currently in South Africa with regard to ceramic production. So my research is intended to expose recent trends in rural community steel making ceramic vessels. I hope this research will generate the attention of art patrons in supporting women in their traditional gendered role as a vessel maker who have told me of their desire to organize and promote formal community projects of art centers. I also hope that ceramic artists can be brought together to exchange skills, idea, and knowledge. Artists need to be nurtured in their work. They need to help marshalling community resources to gain funding to exhibit their work in a way that will stimulate cultural heritage and economic stabilities. Contrary to long-standing statistic image of African pottery, my research shows that women potters are adaptive. Many are economically successful. Indeed, all women potters I visit are living well. They deserve to be supported in their effort to adapt to and take advantage of revitalization of their artistry under the new market. So that's my conclusion. I just want to say thank you very much for people who came here to attend my talk. It was my first presentation at Ntsiga, so that's why I was actually trying to adapt. So I was trying all my best to make sure that I summarize my presentation within the time that I was given. But I just have 2 minutes just to wrap up. And my research, actually, I know that many people might have interest about this form of vessels. What are they used for? These are the granaries, Asian granaries. So they were made by South African Sotho-Tswana group who live in the high veld of South Africa. In 19th centuries, because of the contact with the colonial areas, so they move outside from high veld. They live in the rural Bantustan. They ceased to produce these vessels. So what I did myself, I got some records from archives and began to investigate that they used to have this form of vessels. Therefore, I managed to ask some women to reproduce them. So they are produced by dung only. The decoration are earth colors, so there's no clay used in the production of these vessels. So those people who might have interest of knowing or they want to know about this, you can actually contact me. There are some contact there. Yeah, that's my contact. You can contact me and we can discuss this. And another thing that I want to emphasize, which is very important, is that myself, I'm not an artist. I'm an anthropologist who studied art history. So what I do, I go to rural areas to document the art-making processes by women who are marginalized, so that they can get exposure from galleries and those who are interested by the art. So I work with the women in rural area to go document their work, because they are marginalized. They don't have platform to say anything about the art. So I'm trying to act as their, somebody who can represent them. So that's all about my talks. So thank you very much for people who came here to attend my presentation. It's been a great pleasure to have you guys here. So I appreciate for the people who came here.